Hi guys, welcome to today's video. We have a very special guest, Dr. Jack Singer, all the way from North Carolina, and he has a fascinating story. He was originally a sports psychologist. He's worked with 3 gold medalists and any number of world champions, but then come the financial crash, he switched over to working with financial advisors and working on their mindset. He's the author of 4 books, 197 articles. This man knows what he's talking about. Now, our title today that we're working off is How to Build Resilience and Thrive as a Financial Advisor During Challenging Times. Stay tuned. Hi, Jack. How you doing? Welcome along.
It's a pleasure to be here, and thanks so much for inviting me. I really appreciate it.
Not at all. And to be quite honest with you, everything around mindset, as far as I'm concerned, is a topic for advisors that is not addressed enough. I think there's a lot of mental challenges and stressors around running a financial advisory practice. So I'm really fascinated to dig into this topic today and to get some great tips and some great takeaways for advisors to run a better practice. But, you know, first things first, how did you go from being a sports psychologist, working with, 3 gold medalists, any number of world champions? You worked with like tons of people, I know you did, and then suddenly you started working with financial advisors. How did this happen?
Well, it's really interesting, Paul, because in 2008, you remember what was happening in the world economy, and I received a random call from the head of the Australian Financial Advisors Association. He said he had been reading articles that I had published on stress mastery, which is my specialty. And he asked me if I knew much about the financial services industry, and I said, not really. And he said, well, because of what's happening, his financial advisors are all panicking. At the same time that all that was happening in the world economy, the government of Australia decided to mandate fee for services, so they couldn't hide commissions any longer. And the combination of those 2 events made his advisors want to jump off cliffs like lemmings, and he wanted to put a halt to this. So
wow.
I said, yeah, I can help you design a video series. So I took a deep dive into financial services and had an epiphany. The epiphany was financial professionals are very much like elite athletes. Most of them never live up to their potential. They're worried about competition and meeting goals and worried about their self-esteem, and they're worried about their confidence and things like that. Why can't I teach the same blueprint for success that I've taught to all of these athletes to financial professionals? So at that point, I pivoted my career and I wrote the book, The Financial Advisor's Ultimate Stress Mastery Guide. There had been no books written on how to deal with the stresses involved in the financial services field. So that's the short version of how I got into it.
And on that, I totally get it. And obviously around 2008, there was a huge amount of stress around, being in the financial services industry. There was a huge amount of redundancy. I mean, it was a very stressful time for a lot of people. I totally get that. But if you fast forward 5 years or 10 years later and so on, is the same level of stress still evident, for advisors? Like, do you see them having that amount of pressure, from running an advisory practice? Is that the way you see it?
Well, part of that depends on what's happening in the markets. When the market's doing very well, they seem to be under less stress because they're getting less pressure from clients, for example, and they're looking like heroes because of what they're recommending to clients. But when the market starts jumping through hoops, as it did yesterday, for example, that adds a dimension of stress because of worry. And one of the biggest aspects of my book is teaching people how to stop worrying and how to really look at their situation in a realistic way instead of building stress, because we all build the stress for ourselves. It's not events that cause stress. It's how the conversation we have in our heads about the events that causes the stress. And what I teach people how to do is how to change that conversation, the same as I would teach an elite athlete how to change his or her conversation right before the event. Instead of worrying about what if this happens and what if that happens and how am I going to do this, we change the conversation to, I have the skill, I have the talent, I have the experience, I've been here before, all I have to do is this. So it's the conversation that determines how much stress you're going to be under.
Right. And listen, I love the topic of mindset. I will openly admit I've read 10 and 20 books on the topic of mindset around running businesses and around marketing and growth and so on. Now, some of these books kind of say different things, that they give you different advice, but a lot of what I see appears to be around the self-talk, the conversation in the back of your head, the evil guy on your shoulder who's whispering in your ear, you can't do it, you're not good enough, you're never going to be successful, that type of stuff versus you can do it, you will be successful. And so I remember someone sort of saying to me, well, you need to kind of tone the negative one down and tone the more positive one up. I mean, is it as simple as that? Do you just need to flick a switch in your head?
It's been done, but I have a technique. It's in the book. By the way, a lot of things I'm going to talk about are in the book, and we're going to offer your listeners a real special deal on the book if they're interested. But in the book, I have a mental toughness routine, and that's specifically used for cases like this where you have that internal critic, that negative critic that is repeated because of the habits and the history that you've developed thousands of times repeating the same thing. How do we stop it? So to give your listeners a short version of it, the first thing we want to do is wear one of these rubber bands around your wrist, a thick one, not one that sits tightly. In the States, that's the rubber band that comes with the mail. It's a fat rubber band that sort of sits on your wrist loosely. And every time you recognize that negative self-critical voice coming in, the first thing to do is snap the rubber band. Hard enough to get your attention. The next thing you do is you take a series of deep breaths that are relaxing. And when I say deep breaths, the kind of breaths that I teach financial professionals and athletes to use are the same that musicians and opera singers have learned to use, is breathing through your diaphragm. And the diaphragm sits behind the stomach. So the way you know you're breathing correctly is when you breathe in, your stomach should expand, and when you breathe out, it contracts. Most people who are anxious don't breathe that way. When they breathe in, the only thing that happens is their shoulders move. That's shallow breathing, causes more anxiety. So I teach people to snap the rubber band, then take a deep breath in through your nose to the count of 4. Hold it for 4 seconds, then a big exhale like you're blowing through a straw out through your mouth to the count of 7. People can practice this watching TV, folding their hands over their stomach, lying in bed. You will learn how to breathe that way. It's immensely important to breathe that way to calm yourself down. So step 1 is snapping the rubber band. Step 2 is taking a couple of diaphragmatic breaths. Step 3 is to challenge yourself with where is the evidence that the thing I'm worried about is actually going to happen. Most of the things we worry about in terms of that negative critical thinking pattern are things that will never happen, but they could. And we worry about it as if there's a 100% chance it's going to happen. So for example, if a financial professional sees the market drops 800 points in one day, and the financial professional says to him or herself, what if my clients all fire me now because of the portfolio that I've developed for them that has now taken a major hit? So the question is, what is the probability that all or even most of your clients are going to fire you because of a one-day event in the market? Have you prepared them for these kinds of events? Have you prepared their portfolio to take care of these kinds of events with certain products that you've gotten for them that help in a market that's low like this and so forth? So you have to start thinking rationally. That's the main thing. And so snap the rubber band, do the deep breathing, challenge the thoughts. What's the probability that what I'm worried about is really going to happen? And the final step is change the conversation to something positive. I've been here before. I can deal with it. I've done it before. I'm going to deal with it again. Everything will be fine.
Excellent. So I love that because it's very practical. It's very specific. The snapping the rubber band is obviously quite a physical response you can have in your body. The breathing is, again, quite a physical response. So you're kind of almost controlling your physiology, and that helps you control what's happening in your mind.
It does, because if you don't control the breathing, the pH in your blood changes, which raises the anxiety. This is why when people have panic attacks, they feel like they're having a heart attack, because a lot of things change in your body when you're really anxious and not taking control of it. And, with people having a panic attack, maybe that the first thing is to have them breathe into a paper bag, because they're hyperventilating, breathing so fast that they're getting rid of too much carbon dioxide. That causes all of these changes in their body. You breathe into a paper bag, you rebreathe the carbon dioxide, and you calm down. It's almost miraculous. So breathing is a critically important phase of dealing with anxiety.
Interesting. And do you find that it depends on the person, as in it depends on the advisor, if you know what I mean. In the same way, I'm sure it depends on the athlete. That different athletes deal with stress and pressure in different ways. You know, I look at the golfers. I quite like golf, and there's, you know, a lot of different golfers, and some of them seem to be very prone to getting quite stressed and not really managing things, and some of them seem to not care at all, and they could, you know, they just seem to be ice cool. So is that a personality thing? Is that a, you know, some people just have an innate ability to deal with stress and pressure in a different way?
It's a great question. It is a personality thing, but it's a trait that can be learned if you don't have it. For example, you just had the British Open, and you had a young man, I think in his early 20s, who seemed cool as a cucumber walking the whole thing. And you have other professionals who've been around for years choking in various places.
Right. Yeah.
With a ton of professional golfers in my career. There are two stress-prone personality types that I mention in the book. The two most type A personalities, which many financial advisors encompass, because part of type A is being so focused on your work that you almost have to be successful. But to a fault, you're focused on work where you ignore everything else and you worry about work 24/7. That's where it becomes too much. The other personality trait that leads to stress is the people pleaser, the person who will do almost anything to please someone, even if it's at their own expense. So they never say no to anybody when they ask for favors. So an advisor with that kind of personality is someone who, if a client calls up irritated and they're in the middle of a meeting, they'll break up the meeting just to satisfy the client. They'll do whatever it takes to please people so people won't dislike them. So in the book, I go into quite detail about how you can change some of the traits, if you have either of these personalities, to something that's more healthy and will deal with you in a more viable way on a regular basis.
Excellent. And I know something you talk quite a lot about is how to become more resilient as an advisor. So how to obviously go from the kind of the up, down to being on more of an even keel and being able to control it a bit more. So can you give us an idea of how you build your resilience? Because the concept is wonderful, but the actual practicality of what that looks like is not necessarily obvious.
Yeah, resilience is based on developing healthy habits as opposed to the toxic habits that perhaps a person has had over the years. Let me give you an example of toxic habits. I call them iceberg core beliefs, and I call them iceberg core beliefs because you're only consciously aware of a little bit of this. Most of it is subconscious, just like an iceberg. Most of it's below the surface. So examples of iceberg core beliefs that a lot of financial professionals, as well as every other professional has, are things like this. If I'm not perfect, I'm a failure. So I have to struggle to be perfect all the time, which is impossible. So that's an exercise in futility. Or I need to avoid confrontations at all costs because I need to have everybody like me all the time. Totally unrealistic, but a lot of people have that mindset. Or if I ask for help, it's a sign of weakness. So many financial advisors will not ask for a mentor, even though that's something that's offered to them all the time, because they think it's a sign of weakness. So when I'm working with someone, coaching an advisor, I find out what these core beliefs are so we can break them down and find out which ones make sense and which ones are really toxic, leading to the negative self-talk that leads to the stress in the first place.
And how open do you find your average advisor is, whether they're new or whether they've been in the industry for 30 years? How open do you find that they are to working on their own mindset? I find advisors are very busy. They're busy with day-to-day. They're busy with dealing with clients. They're busy with this. They're busy with promotion and marketing and everything else. And maybe don't have the time to really properly work on what might be limiting them or holding them back. Is that what you see as well?
Yeah, I think it's more a matter of male versus female than advisors versus other professionals, because in all professionals, and I've worked with doctors and lawyers and entrepreneurs, it's the men that resist this more than the women. The women are much more open to dealing with feelings and worries and concerns. The men have all kinds of hangups about that and find excuses not to do it. But usually the advisors I'm working with are ones who are worried that they're going to lose their practice, or their boss has told them they're not meeting their quotas and things like that, or they know about me and the work I can do for them because I've done a presentation for their firm or at a meeting that they've been at. And once they do come in to see me, we develop trust and rapport right away. So they know it's confidential. So they know nothing bad can happen to them if they expose these fears they have and the habits they have, so we can break them down. And then once they see that their feelings, their emotions, their anxiety melts away, I mean, then it's rather dramatic. They refer me to other people and things like that because they see that this really works. It's just a matter of uncovering one's habits in terms of their thinking and changing those to more positive, nutritious kind of habits.
And do you get into things like, I know in the likes of tennis and golf and some of those different sports, you'd often see the golfer, visualize the shot before they hit it, or the tennis player would visualize, the result of the game, the set or the match or winning the trophy and so on. Is that the kind of things that you'd be bringing into play with advisors as well?
There's no question, because I actually make hypnotic recordings for advisors, just like I did for every athlete I work with, because the subconscious mind, when it hears positive things and visualizes positive things happening, even if they aren't really happening in real life, if you visualize it enough, your subconscious mind wants to make it happen. It's a whole other story about how I got into hypnosis, because when I was in graduate school, I thought it was weird and magical, and the professor had a ponytail before men were doing that. Incense was burning in the office. I thought it was so weird. but in my practice over 30 years, I've discovered how powerful it is. And I belong to the American Society for Clinical Hypnosis. Powerful for athletes, powerful for advisors, visualizing positive things. Example, many advisors, when they know they're having a meeting with a client or potential client, prospects, they visualize the last horror show they had instead of a positive thing. They visualize, well, I hope I don't make the same mistake I made last time, or last time this happened, they didn't want to buy anything, they didn't want to hire me, they more or less walked out of the room, or, people remember the negatives much more than the positives. So we have to change that whole thing around and change the visualization to something positive. So for a golfer, for example, coming up to a par 3 with a water hazard, the last thing we want the golfer to think about is the last time he or she hit it into the water. We want to visualize landing, 10 feet from the cup and then rolling toward the cup like they did 4 tournaments ago, whatever. Only positive visualizations is what we're after. So another great and insightful question by Paul Thompson. Thank you.
Well, the other thing, the thing that I struggle with, you're right, we had the British Open just in the last few days. And as you said, there was some very experienced players were chasing this young guy, and he won, and he did an amazing job. The thing I wonder, with someone who's super experienced like Spieth or McIlroy, or some of these guys have been around the block, but they're still hitting kind of wayward shots, or they're still landing it in the water, or you can see that they're visualizing, but obviously the visualization doesn't work. So is that them getting their mindset wrong? Is that them getting their preparation wrong, or have they got too much rattling around in their head?
Well, what it usually is, especially with an experienced athlete or an experienced advisor, for that matter, is that they worry about what ifs. The 2 worst words that ever were put together in the English language is what if, because it's almost always followed by something negative. So, if for example, in golf, where you can hear the cheering coming from another hole, you know who's on that playing there. And if you hear the cheering, if you say to yourself, what if I've fallen behind now? That's all you need to do to set your body into the fight or flight motion, which unconsciously tightens your grip on the club and can screw that up until you bring it back down again. So those are the simple things that can happen, worrying about who you're competing against, especially if you're fighting for a lot of money, and one shot can make a huge difference in money. If you've just double faulted in tennis, you're worried about doing it again. These things can creep in at any time. So we're always talking to people about how to recognize the precursors to that and stop it. So for example, for a golfer, I would have them, once they've learned my hypnotic techniques, I would have them initiate that by squeezing their fist while they're walking toward the ball. They squeeze their fist, it brings a calmness, and I can do this, and I know how to do this. I know which club, I know how many yards, I know what I have to do. I know if I have to draw the ball, whatever the case may be. You do that by squeezing your fist, it brings you back into that hypnotic state. And when Tiger Woods first got started, I happened to be living in Las Vegas, and he played his first major tournament in Las Vegas, and he was really young. And I saw how his eyes were glassed over. And I said to my wife, someone has taught him hypnosis. He's walking around in a hypnotic state. And I learned later on, he actually, at the age of 16, his father brought him to a hypnosis specialist to learn self-hypnosis. A lot of golfers do this. And Jack Nicklaus always said that he visualized every shot as if he knew he was going to make it. And he was always amazed at how close the ball came to the target he was visualizing in his mind. So there's a lot of precursors for this, a lot of evidence that this really works, but you have to do it consistently. When you start to slip, you have to recognize that and bring it back again.
All right, I totally see that. So let's make this kind of simple. Let's look at the case of, say, a newer advisor. Okay, not a guy who's been around the block for 30 years, but someone who's relatively new. Maybe they've been building their book or practice, for 6 months, 12 months, 18 months. They're maybe going through the struggles and doubts of it. I haven't got a lot of income. Will I make this a success? I've got pressure from my friends and family, etc. So what would you say to them about how they could build their mindset or even protect their mindset as they build their business?
Well, the first thing I would suggest to every new advisor is get a mentor who's been around the block. And don't get caught up with that means I'm weak or things like that. You don't have to reinvent the wheel. They've already invented it. Let them show you, how to do it. And they were in your shoes at one point. So how did they deal with it? So the best thing is find a mentor who's very successful, but maybe was unsure of him or herself in the beginning and can tell you how they work through it, because then you have a plan that you can go by. Step number 2 is you have to make sure that you take charge of that internal critic and stop it as soon as it jumps in there. What if this person doesn't want an advisor? What if this person is not interested in my services? That's okay. I teach people, just like an athlete, put negatives behind you and look for your next opportunity. You don't have to win every seminar you give. You don't have to always get a new client. You don't have to provide information to people at a dinner, for example, and if they don't take you on as an advisor, so what? Wait for your next opportunity. That's the key. Instead of constantly rehashing, what did I do wrong? Why didn't they like me? Maybe this career isn't for me. Those are the negative habits that we don't want to have people develop. So recognize the habits and recognize when they creep in, and then I teach them, how to stop it. And this is the key way. Wait for your next opportunity. When one door closes, there's always another one opening if you keep your eyes open. That's the key. Take a tennis player, for example. Tennis player loses a game. Are you going to focus on why you lost the game, or are you going to look at what your next opportunity is, when you start playing again? That's the key. If you're focused on what you didn't do well, your body's going to tense itself up again because it thinks there's an emergency, which is going to continue to make you not do well. We want to stop these habits dead in their tracks.
Absolutely. And obviously the last year and a half, COVID has affected everybody all over the world. And it of course, has had an impact significantly on the financial advisory industry. And the trend that we're seeing, and I talk to a lot of advisors all over the world, but the trend that we're seeing is a move towards running a more virtual practice. So less face-to-face, less seminars, etc., more Zoom calls, and more running a virtual practice. And there's a lot of benefits for advisors from that, in being spend more time with your family and friends, less time on the road, and potentially manage more clients. Great. That can be really positive. But I think there's probably a negative aspect as well around people's mindset and the lack of human connection and so on that goes on. And I personally have run a virtual business for more than 5 years. I'm very used to it. It doesn't faze me at all. But some people were kind of forced into this because of COVID. Is this something that you're seeing as well? And are you seeing advisors kind of struggle with it, or is there any kind of techniques you think that they should be looking at?
Yeah, I think COVID, if there has to be a silver lining, it has proven that you can connect with people virtually, which makes life a lot simpler for both the client and the advisor. And the thing that the advisor needs to remember is to connect frequently with clients instead of waiting for a disaster like the market crashes and suddenly the clients are contacting you. Do it in a preventive way so that you have monthly meetings that you can advise all of your clients to. And you can talk about either products that you've become aware of that they may be interested in. You can talk about what happens the next time the market goes down, how we're prepared for that. Clients really like it when you connect with them and they feel important, as opposed to them having to contact you for a meeting. It's critically important that we do this in a proactive way. And once clients have purchased certain products that you've recommended, or policies, or whatever the case may be, you want to keep in contact with them and ask if they have any questions, if there are any concerns, instead of moving on to the next client. Like, I'm done with that one, I have to move to the next client. So I think a lot of advisors that have been very successful have used these virtual meetings to their advantage, where they have them scheduled either on a monthly or even some bi-weekly way, where people can join in, 10, 15, 20, 30 clients at a time, whatever the case may be. And also, when you want to have meetings with, I'm sorry for that interruption, when you want to have meetings with clients on a regular basis, but also, have them scheduled as well, so that, we're going to meet with you and your family, next Tuesday, and here's what we're going to discuss, here's what the agenda is, and see if you have any questions. Because many times clients are so confused by all of the financial information that's coming at them. They're afraid to ask questions. It makes them look weak or stupid or whatever they say to themselves. And so you want to anticipate the kinds of questions. If they don't understand why they're into a certain product, or if their portfolio is aimed in a certain direction, anticipate those questions so you can answer them for them. I find that in my experience with a lot of advisors, the clients who believe that the advisor anticipates these questions and addresses them without waiting for them to be asked, the clients feel a big sense of relief.
And on that, I know something you also talk quite a lot about, I think, in the book, is how to select and retain ideal clients. And this is something that we talk about a lot. We see a lot of advisors being honestly not picky at all about the clients they take on. They pretty much take on anybody with a pulse and some form of a financial need, which means they end up with a book that's kind of all over the place in different industries and so on. So can you speak to that as to how people would want to select and retain ideal clients?
Yeah, actually, in the book, I came up with the 10 most difficult kinds of clients, and I gave funny descriptions of each one. And a little description, funny titles for each one, and then a description of what personality that is, and why you perhaps should choose to refer that person to another client. You're right. In the beginning, advisors will take on anything with a pulse that has some money, because they want to build their book of business. They want to look good to their boss. They have quotas to fill, things like that. But then you have to cull the herd as you start going along, because there are certain clients that will not match or click or come together with your personality. And those are going to cause a lot of stress for you. So, for example, obsessive compulsive clients are people who are worried about every time the market moves 10 times a day. I know an advisor, for example, who has a client who calls 4 times a day. Well, what are my things doing now? And because the client has a lot of money involved with them, they're afraid to confront the client. So in my book, I have a whole chapter on how to recognize difficult clients and give yourself the best birthday gift you could give yourself every year on your birthday. Cut 1 or 2 of them out of the herd. Call them out of the herd. Refer them very nicely with a letter to someone else. Tell them that because of the personality conflict that you're sensing, you know that they're frustrated with you. You don't want them to be that way. So you have an advisor who's perfectly happy to work with them, that kind of thing. And then you feel a big sense of relief when you get this client off your back. Other clients are ones who get angry very quickly. You want to recognize those people, or people who expect that they're the only client you have. You have to give them attention, whenever they call you. So I've given a whole list of 10 of these and how to deal with each one of them.
I love it. The other thing I suppose that's happening at the moment in particular is kind of the explosion in sort of fintech or advisor tech and various other technology to assist the advisors in running their practice and so on. Have you seen much of that? Do you think that's an added stressor for advisors, or do you find that that's reducing the workload, or easing the process a little bit more?
Well, many advisors have complained to me that the technology challenges are challenges for them because they're not technically, connected. But after a while, when they learn about these things and they see how they work, they feel much more comfortable. So my experience has been, in the beginning, they get frightened and they want to avoid it. But after they get used to it, because everyone's doing it in the office or what have you, it becomes a comfort. But then again, some of that technology is hard to translate to clients who are not technologically connected, and you have to be patient with them. Don't get frustrated or irritated. You know, my own son, who's very technologically connected, gets frustrated with me because I don't understand certain things on my cell phone. I don't understand certain things on the computer, and I say, just calm down. It'll be okay. You know, just explain it to me in layman's terms if you can, because it's all new technology for me. And that's what advisors have to do. So in the beginning, they get frightened by the technology, but they really need to understand that this is the way the world is going to be. It's not going to go backwards, so they better get on board.
And on that, where do you think things are going in the advisory industry? I would argue that it's changed a lot in the last 20 years, you know, not just from technological point of view, but just in terms of how people interact and people's expectations of advisors. Obviously, the public, you could consider them to be more educated. They've got more access to apps and obviously internet and all that sort of stuff as well. So where do you see things going?
Well, I think that one of the challenges for advisors is a lot of people decide they can be their own stockbroker, and they do it all themselves, or they do a portion of it themselves, and they really do not have the training or education to do that. So that's an exercise in potential disaster when people do that. And advisors, and there's robot advisors, where it's happening automatically, where people can do that. So I think those are challenges for advisors. So I think advisors need to become more creative and offer products that people can't get on their own or understand on their own, that advisors really are the experts. For example, why would buying life insurance be a good investment at certain ages? These are things advisors are the experts in, and various products and what they offer in annuities and things like that, so that most people can't do on their own, because people are thinking, well, if I can buy and sell my own stocks, I don't have to worry about paying an advisor, things like that. And you can nip that in the bud if you provide seminars for advisors on what the benefits are for you. The other thing that I see as a challenge and a problem for a lot of advisors, Paul, especially young ones, is that they're too quick to try to sell themselves and their services, rather than just getting to know a potential client, finding out what keeps that person up at night, finding out what their challenges are in life, and then perhaps finding something you can provide for them that will address those issues, but not lead with that. This is called collaborative selling, where you collaborate with a potential client to learn about them, to develop rapport, and to then finally, when you understand what it is they're most worried about, you can address that at that point. So a lot of what I teach advisors is how to learn what I call the inner game of sales success, what goes on in your head, and how not to deal with trying to be too pushy, too salesy. That turns a lot of people off. And new advisors really don't understand that. It takes practice.
Ironically, that fits very neatly with what we would advocate in our business around, leading with the problems and challenges of the people you're actually trying to speak to. They don't care what products you have or what services you have until they get that you understand them. And once they understand that you understand them, then they're open to hearing whatever solution or problem you might potentially have.
Exactly. And they want to know that you understand them completely, and that's not just being salesy, that you get it. Like if they're having a problem with their children at a certain age, that you understand that. So I teach financial advisors what we call active empathic listening skills. And in the book also, listening skills, so that they actually learn how to listen rather than being too anxious to give their point. People want to know they're really being listened to in a genuine fashion, and that you really understand where they're coming from. And you may at some point say, I don't have an answer to that, but let me look into it and I'll get back with you. It's okay to tell people, I don't know the answer to that question. It's a great question. Let me get back with you. A lot of advisors think they have to answer people right away, or they look like they're idiots, or they're not professional. And that's simply not true. People will respect you if you say, I will get back with you. I have to look into this and ask some other people who have experienced the same problem.
Excellent. And listen, you've had a very interesting career. You've got 4 books, 197 articles. You've got online courses. You went from sports psychology, then you started working with advisors. I mean, you've been busy. That's good. You've been busy in the last kind of 20 plus years. What's next for Jack?
Well, right now I'm busy with, we're going to get back into keynote speaking. I already got booked for a couple of them. I was happy doing the virtual ones because I didn't have to travel anywhere and it's very easy. But they want in-person things again, so I'm going to be back on the road doing keynote speaking and into companies. But I have an online course for advisors that they can get 12 continuing education credits for, and that's the only one of its kind in developing the mindset of a champion financial services professional. And by the way, I have some goodies that I'd like to offer to your listeners if it's okay to discuss them now. That be all right?
Absolutely, please do. Go ahead.
Okay. So I mentioned the book, The Financial Advisor's Ultimate Stress Mastery Guide. If you were to purchase that through Amazon or so, it's $37. But if you want me to send you the e-version of it for $15, you just have to email me at drjack@advisingtheadvisors.com, and that's ORS, advisors.com. And I will send you that book with my compliments for $15. It'll probably be the best thing you ever had to help you with the mindset. Additionally, if you are interested in taking my course in developing the mindset, which is really comprehensive and you can spend as much time as you want taking it, but I will provide all of your listeners with a 20% discount. So again, email me at drjack@advisingtheadvisors.com. You want a discount, and I'll send you a coupon to do that. And thirdly, I am happy to offer a free, complimentary, completely complimentary, with no obligation, coaching session for any of your listeners who want a coaching session. No obligation. They not have to buy other coaching sessions or anything. Let's see what I can do to help you in one session or direct you that it will really help you for that. And the last thing is I also do programs for clients of advisors. I learned years ago that putting people in a restaurant in the back room and hoping they'll come for a free meal and it's usually a waste of money and time.
Right.
So I developed a program called How to Live Much Longer Than Your Kids Hoped You Would. It's a psychology of life extension. What client would not want to hear a nationally known psychologist teach you how to live longer and better? So it packs the house. They all bring guests who get very excited about this advisor really cares so much about his or her client. They're bringing Dr. Jack in to teach them how to live better. Maybe I need to reconsider where my money goes. So if you're interested in talking to me about that, and we do it virtually now too, on how to live much longer than your kids hoped you would, a client event that would pack the house, contact me at drjack@advisingtheadvisors.com.
Excellent. What's the best website? Is it advisingtheadvisors.com the best website for people to jump on?
Now, that's not a website, although it'll lead to another website. The website is drjacksinger.com.
Perfect. drjacksinger.
In advisingtheadvisors.com is a website. It'll take you to drjacksinger.com. I didn't want to complicate the matter with different websites. So
We'll put the links in the show notes today anyway, so people can check them out in there. So listen, that's very generous to offer the free coaching session, and obviously give people a chance to get access to your book and be able to bring you in to speak to their clients as well. So that's absolutely phenomenal. So listen, thank you so much for your time today. I really appreciate it. It's been great to kind of dig into this topic. As I said to you, it's kind of a topic that's close to my heart. I don't think it's addressed enough. I think it kind of gets glossed over a lot by advisors when, in fact, as you say, like the iceberg, it is actually the big thing that really kind of needs to be addressed, isn't it? So thank you so much for your time. I really appreciate it, and best of luck now that you're going back out on the road with all your speaking as well.
Paul, it's my pleasure, and anytime you want an encore presentation, I'd be happy to come back. You're a wonderful host.
Excellent. Thanks, Jack. Appreciate it.